2008 was a pretty memorable year. Barack Obama was elected as the first black president of the United States. We had arguably the greatest superhero movie of all time in the shape of The Dark Knight, and Marvel kicked off their ambitious cinematic universe with Iron Man. It also happened to be the year that Electronic Arts and their studio in Redwood City in California decided to make a horror game. The company behind the Need for Speed series, FIFA and Madden, had decided to release a third-person survival horror game. Electronic Arts at the time weren't too fond of new intellectual properties, with good reason. The games in their portfolio were doing tremendously well. Understandably, however, with this, a steady desire grew within the developers to create something new.
Started with Glenn Schofield, the EP. He had a vision for a game that he was all excited about, and he wanted to do a prison game in space, and I think he wanted to even call it, Moon Wars or something.
No, it wasn't called Moon Wars. It was, Rancid Moon, that's right, yes. It was sort of like Escape from New York on another planet.
And we were like, okay, we got the space part, we're down with that. I'm not so sure about the prisoner part.
Dead Space, released in late 2008, was the result of that desire. Initially conceived as a sequel to the much-loved System Shock 2, Dead Space ended up being the game that would go on to define Visceral Games as one of the breakout developers in the games industry. Due in part to EA's position on new IPs, the game was being pushed towards being named System Shock 3. As Electronic Arts had the rights to an existing IP, it seemed logical that if a sci-fi horror was to be made, then attaching a well-known name to said project made sense. However, one of the lead developers, Ben Wynett, spoke candidly about the pressures that were placed on the team. So with that in mind, the idea was shelved, and Dead Space as we know it was born.
It just felt like it was the right time to go and, talk to the general manager and president of the company about making our own IP.
Glenn decided that it was now or never. So he went to the bosses. He was like, look, I got my guys. We're all together. We really want to do this. Give us a little time. Let me show you what we got.
And this is just basically the type of project we wanted to work on for years and years.
The first thing that we did was, I remember the president saying to me, okay, you can take your 18 people, pick your people, give me the list, and we'll give you 6 months. And I think it was important to us not to come out with a doc at the end of the 6 months. It was, what we really wanted to do was sort of put something in their hands to play.
That just buys you a huge, huge amount of confidence. And I'd say that's almost single-handedly the reason that we got to be greenlit, is we did a very thick and detailed vertical slice.
Dead Space would take place on the USG Ishimura. The story followed everyday maintenance engineer Isaac Clarke after he receives a message from his estranged girlfriend during one of the Ishimura's routine planet mining tasks. Isaac and his team respond to the distress call and set out to repair the ship's communications. Upon reaching the space station with his crew, all are killed except for Isaac, a commander and a computer specialist. Surrounded by necromorphs and more questions than answers, Isaac still has a job to do and a mystery to uncover. Based on its setting and storyline, Dead Space's sci-fi roots are evident, yet the setting is grounded in realism in order to keep things relatable through the lived-in appearance of the Ishimura itself. The development team went to great lengths to make sure that the infected space station had the right feel, look, and sound.
What we tried to do is look at real things, like when you're in a dentist chair, right? And and he swings that light over you, and it's like it's got like a fly in it, and the lens is like from 1979. It's all yellow and gross, and it's kind of like you feel interrogated. And we ended up basing all of our light fixtures on dentist light. You'd think that it'd be super easy to like make up a spaceship, and in a way it kind of is. But if it's like all fantasy and magic and stuff, people aren't going to believe that this horror stuff is going to happen, and it won't really make them feel scared.
It's sort of how we envision the future. It's not going to be the sterile environment. It's really sort of dirty and dank. These people had to live on the ship too. So we thought about, where would they sleep, what would they do for fun, how would they grow their food, and I think these are all the different areas that you'll see within the Ishimura.
It's not creepy unless there's a reason for it to be creepy. We're able to emphasize the fear and support it. And if it's this big, we can make it this big on the fear scale.
We were really fortunate on this game that Glenn realized early on, even though he didn't quite know what it was he wanted, he knew that audio was really important. And so he's really made us a big part of it.
We've done this before where we've turned off a scary movie, the picture, and just run the audio, and it's very scary. But if you turn off the audio and just watch the movie, it's not scary at all. So in our game, audio is just about everything.
Isaac isn't decked out in armoured military uniform either, he's an engineer, and as you start out your journey you're exposed to the elements and the necromorphs that reside on the ship, with just a helmet to protect you. Staying true to the natural essence of horror was important too. Veering too close to sci-fi tropes would have diminished horror aspects of the game, a balancing act which the team knew would need to be dealt with carefully.
It's really important for us to keep the story grounded because this is a horror story. This isn't Star Wars, this isn't space fantasy.
Because science fiction sort of works against horror, like they sort of fight each other, and you really have to keep the science fiction thing in check if you want the horror to come out.
From the use of lighting to the way that the sound keeps you on your toes, Dead Space was a landmark moment for Visceral and Electronic Arts. There's a palpable sense of expectation that's hard to escape when playing through Dead Space. Everything seems engineered purely to make you feel uneasy, apprehensive, and on your toes, unlike a lot of horror games at the time. Dead Space was genuinely unsettling. You may have walked through a particular corridor 2 times before, but the way Visceral has crafted its jump scares keeps you aware that the 3rd time may not be like before. You may be greeted by an enemy or not, but that's not the point. The point was to make sure that the player felt like they could be genuinely scared at any moment, that they could be thrust into an unexpected scenario at any given time. The use of a close-up camera angle, Isaac's slow movement speed, and the claustrophobic corridors help convey a sense of isolation and vulnerability, a theme that's woven into his story. It's all these things that made Dead Space a phenomenal game and an instant classic. Deservedly too, Visceral now thought they were onto something. They had proved the doubters wrong and created a game that they wanted to create. The game previewed and reviewed extremely well and remains one of the highest rated horror games of all time. Yet we know success doesn't depend purely on a Metacritic score of 89. Dead Space had to succeed commercially too. After all, EA is a business and the game that Visceral produced wasn't cheap. Dead Space would go on to sell over 2 million copies, modest by EA standards, but impressive for a new IP nonetheless. It was hard to ignore the success it brought. A new studio was thriving, riding the wave of success on a product that they believed in, when others around them doubted them. What was next for the studio? Well, that was the thing that music artists of today still struggle with. The next album, the sequel. Do you do more of the same, or something new? Visceral would indeed go on to release a sequel for Dead Space in early 2011. Dead Space 2 proved to be a hit. It obtained the hard-to-achieve title of being a sequel that surpassed the original in terms of copies sold, general gameplay, and its reception with critics and fans alike. Dead Space 2 sold what the original did in its lifetime in its first week. The success led to the almost inevitable release of Dead Space 3 in 2013, 2 years later. What followed was an outcry. Fans were far from impressed from the direction that Dead Space 3 had taken the series in. A further emphasis on action meant that the horror and sci-fi aspects took a back seat, aspects that had been intertwined so well in the first 2 entries of the game. Dead Space 3 was by no means a bad game, but it was far from what many expected and wanted from the series. The game underperformed commercially and was the weakest of the 3 entries in terms of sales and general opinion. The aspects that made the original Dead Space excel were amplified and enhanced in Dead Space 2, not forgotten, an aspect the developers themselves have admitted was lacking in the 3rd entry. In spite of this stumble, if not fall from grace, Dead Space will always be remembered fondly for those who played it. It was a brave, bold and ultimately violent, visceral experience that exceeded expectations greatly. Its legacy is still felt today. Its impeccable attention to detail in its audio, which netted the team a BAFTA in sound design.
And the BAFTA goes to Dead Space.
Set a new benchmark for other developers to aim for. The way the game took two genres and melded them together effortlessly took patience, dedication, and clarity of thought from its designers. Its effect is still felt within EA as a company as well, reigniting a desire for the corporation to take risks on new intellectual properties and existing ones. Unravel and last year's The Journey mode in FIFA bear testament to their dedication to try new things and innovate. Above all, Dead Space stayed true to its original design brief, to be a true survival horror game. It's a shame then that the original Dead Space's memory will be tarnished slightly by the retrospective opinion of Dead Space 3. There probably won't be a remastered or an Ultimate Edition coming anytime soon. But with Resident Evil 7 proving that a developer can go back to its roots and inject new life into a franchise, hope will remain that one day, maybe one day, we will step back into the boots of Isaac Clarke and helm that plasma cutter one more time.